So, how to spot a Marxist, but not the good kind. This is going to be off the cuff. I'm just going to show you images along with it. No script, no AI recording. The concept of Marxism is very appealing to a lot of people, particularly young ones and in college, and for various reasons. And it's become growingly more and more popular and even sort of out of the closet, so to speak, because of what's being pushed in the education system to young people. But everybody, the idea of workers of the world unite, no more greedy businessmen, no more greedy corporations, the workers owning the means of production, all of this stuff, it sounds great from a theoretical standpoint. Introduced by Karl Marx. So this concept sounds great. Also, things like religion is the opiate of the masses. Sounds great. But in reality, communism in any form that it's practiced, including the Marxism that is actively destroying Western civilization, as I'm going to call it, as we speak in the education, entertainment, and business world, currently going on, actively destroying the underlying culture of America, Western Europe, and even what I call Western civilization countries like Japan, Korea, Israel, things like that. The colonization world, so to speak, is evil, fascist, authoritarian, never ends well, censorship-ridden, represses thought, represses free thought, doesn't ever produce anything of much creative or sort of entrepreneurial value. If you look at every major invention that's come out in the last 100 years, 150 years, from the Industrial Revolution onward, all from Western civilization, going back to the Greeks, the Romans, the origins of modern philosophy, thought, critical thinking, it all comes from that. That's not to say, like I said, there are other parts of the world, other things it comes from. I'm going to use Western civilization as a blank term, and capitalism. And I'm not saying unfettered capitalism is a great thing, but I'm saying that protecting what I'm going to call the American dream, the American life that was sort of created for the world, is a very important thing and is under attack by Marxism and cultural Marxism. And don't let anybody fucking tell you that cultural Marxism, you can't use the term because some people in the 1930s used it who were basically fascists. The term itself means soft application of Marxism, going in, undermining through entertainment, education, nowadays business, shockingly enough, capitalism, large capitalism, not small business. It's something where bigger government is better. The more government, the better. Government knows best. Experts know best for you. Does that sound familiar? Trust the science. People obey. Those who don't obey are censored, silenced. We saw it happen an insane amount of times with COVID. Goes on with all social media. Elon Musk freed Twitter from this. You literally saw the trending topics change the second he took over because he turned off the biased results, or the shadow banning of people who disagreed, all that type of thing. The organized campaigns, which are funded, in fact, and partially by people like Soros. Some of the biggest enemies, I guess you could call it, I would put in the current world are Soros and his umbrella organizations, the head of Blackrock, and the head of Disney. Those would be like three obvious elitist spreading Marxism to undermine the West. The reason why they do it, it's complex. But basically this leftist ideology is pervaded among the Western left, entitled rich white people, so much, particularly since Trump got elected and then COVID, there was a takeover. This is funded and undermined by a lot of exterior groups like China and things like that. But I'll talk about that a little more as well. But let's go back to what you are when you think you're a Marxist. You believe a guy with a beard. First off, they all hate religion. They're atheists. But they have their own religions and belief systems, which you can't question, such as trans, such as climate change. There are doctrines that you can't change. There are purity circles that turn on each other. Beliefs that all white straight males are bad. They're at the top of the pyramid of bad. They're at the top of the iceberg. But it's going to work its way down eventually. It works its way to white straight females. It works its way to black straight males, black straight females, Latinos who have traditional family values. It works all the way down. So eventually it's a firing squad. The only ones that are pure are the ones in power who get all the benefits in the massive hypocrisy. I visited countries that were communist in the Iron Curtain just after communism fell, and don't let anybody tell you life was good there under that. Pollution everywhere, no restaurants, no food, no goods in the shops. It was a fucking shithole. That's the definition of a shithole. They censored what media could come in. They censored everything. And if you see that going on now, this is I'm almost going to call it corporate communism. It's what they have in China, whereby party runs all, government runs all. Some companies are allowed to get rich. You're not allowed to say what you think. There's mass persecutions going on. The Tibetans, the Muslims that live there. There's work camps. There's forced labor. There's huge environmental problems. There's aggressive militarization and attacking and wanting things to be taken over. This is what you are supporting when you vote and you're supporting for leftist causes. Underlying the surface, and this is going on as rapidly accelerated. It was a flashback to Trump. It was a reaction to when Trump got elected, and then also with COVID put it all bare, and also started the ball rolling of inflation and people losing all sense of authority and lawlessness, with looting being allowed to go on for months and months and months. And now you see massive shoplifting. You see a rise in crime over the last few years. It's coming back around to the 1970s. But what they really are, or it turns out they're actually not Marxists. It's Stalinists and Maoists, okay? And you just probably need to look up, something about these gentlemen. Of course, Stalin led Russia, Mao led China, cult of personalities. You can look up, read for yourself about them, particularly the Cultural Revolution in China, whereby young people sort of took over the party in the country and started burning all old materials. Literally, there's not that many materials in China from before them because they destroyed them. They carried a little red book that was like their version of the Bible, even though they were communists. And you had to basically quote from this book. And they took, so does that sound familiar with sort of like what we're doing with entertainment now, whereby we're prescribing a formula that has to be put into every Disney product, for example, the Academy Award nominations, Hollywood. It's not about the story and the characters and this and that. It's pushing a message down people's throats, where people are actively rebelling and being like, this is crap. If it's good, people don't care. Disney has had flop after flop after flop, but they don't care. Iger doesn't care at this point because they're so rich and they have so many brand names that they're indoctrinated so far. They've jumped the shark so far into this that they're like, we're doing what needs to be done. They're ideological warriors. But you notice they're taking existing brands and doing this. They're taking Star Wars. They're taking Marvel. They're taking all the Disney princesses. So they're not creating their own IP because communist countries never have good IP except for people bitching about it. Solzhenitsyn and people like that expressing this bleak, horrible, repressive, censored life. Stalin, worse than Mao. How many people died under these wonderful communist Marxist regimes? If you notice, a lot of the art coming out is very propaganda oriented. That comes out of these kind of countries. Little Red Book. Washington Post, 1994, estimated perhaps 40 to 80 million died under Mao, Chinese. By the way, Mao is still a figurehead part of Chinese communist lore today. How many people died under Stalin? Estimated 20 million or higher. Now, the thing was, these were tended to be over the course of years, as opposed to Hitler, who was in a very short, concentrated time frame. Although Stalin did have some horrific purges, and sending the people to Siberia, and rats turning on themselves, everybody trying to point out who is the disloyal party communist rat. And meanwhile, the party members have private little vacation homes. They can bring in some Western goods, sort of like how, a lot of Arab, Muslim, oil tyrants nowadays live a theoretically pious Muslim life at home, and then they come to the West and they have white prostitutes, gambling, you name it. What's allowed for some is not allowed for others, which is sort of the basis of this book that should be read by all people in school. It used to be, but apparently it's probably not, because they're probably just teaching, how awful the West is because of slavery and colonization and things like that. But Animal Farm is really the simplistic way of understanding how these things turn out, and why being a Marxist is actually horrible to live under and never ends well throughout history. Western civilization. Greeks, philosophy, respecting mind and original thought, sort of an argumentative system, debating. The Romans built an empire that expanded from England to, basically Turkey. Roads and things that are still in use today came from ancient Rome. There was a degree of upward mobility in Rome. Slaves could be freed and become businessmen. Created many of the tenets that we live by today in Western civilization. And then, of course, America, which America has peaked, but I'm trying to stop it from going into an imminent downward death spiral collapse. America peaked, whether you want to look at it as 9/11 and sort of Homeland Security and Bush's Iraq War, or the financial crisis of 08, or COVID/Trump. America did peak. This is the century of China, and to a lesser degree India and countries like that. But this doesn't mean the values of it should be destroyed. The values of it are what we used to push out to the world through Hollywood and things like that. And it attracts people from all over the world, because to this day, people are flooding to come into America. Unfortunately, many illegally. But people come here because there is an American dream still. It's come here, work hard, and then perhaps you, perhaps your kids, perhaps your grandkids become sort of somewhat assimilated in a way, but also have a dream. Get a house with a white picket fence that's safe, that doesn't have crime, have cable TV, have internet, have Wi-Fi, blah, 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 blah. And that this occurs in other countries around the world, but sort of the modern origins of it come from America. Prosperity, freedom, success, dreams, independence, upward mobility, entrepreneurship. Well, who are some of the contributors to sort of the spread of this, in the West? China's a big one. China's got 100-year, they look 100 years ahead. They look 20 years ahead. We look one election ahead, or one earnings quarter ahead. By the way, COVID came out of China. That's not denied. Now we basically know, which I've been saying for so long, that COVID was a man-made mutation of a virus that originated in the Wuhan Virology Lab, which is the top virology lab in China and one of the largest in the world, which just so happened to be situated in the city where COVID emerged. That's not a fucking coincidence. The simplest solution is the obvious one. This is being proved now over and over, although many want to still hedge their bets on it. But if you look at things, go back and look at the Lancet letter, go back and look at EcoHealth Alliance, look at Barrick Labs in North Carolina, which is still operating, look at Fauci. And if you notice who really, really, really jumped on board with all the mandates and said you have to follow the government, was the left. They fucking loved the government shutting everything down, telling people what to do, all of this stuff, following the rules. Russia is another active participant in wanting to destroy the West. Putin and his oligarchs control the resources. They're always been in competition with the West. Russia sadly had, like a 10-year experiment with democracy and sort of unfettered capitalism gone a little too far. And it quickly morphed into another strongman and a small group concentrating the wealth. These are enemies of Western civilization and America and Western Europe, countries like that. There's a reason that they're partnered up with China on many things, even though they've traditionally been in competition as well. Also, oil money contributes to this, specifically Middle Eastern oil money, specifically Saudi funding madrasas that teach fundamental Islam all over the world since about 30, 40 years, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. But don't just think Saudi's the only bad country over there. They're all bad. Iran, all the fucking little corrupt Gulf states that for years and years wasted their money on prostitutes and gold-plated Rolls Royces and all this shit because they really were a bunch of desert Bedouins, nomads, goat herders who stumbled across oceans and oceans of oil, and the British gave it all to them after World War II. And more strict religion, fundamentalist Islam has taken over the Muslim world, whereby a lot more people, a lot more women wear hijabs, head covering scarves, than in the past in countries like Indonesia and many other places. Not to mention, a culture that makes women dress like this, that throws gay people off roofs and all that, that wants to destroy all Jewish people in the world, even though there's 15 million Jewish people in the world and there's 2 billion Muslims. They glommed on the PLO in the 1960s to the left hippie movements in America, which a lot of those were Marxist, and some of those, in fact, were infiltrated by the Soviet Union. The seeds planted of the 1960s have come home to roost today. They finally are winning. It has to be stopped. So it's not pure Marxism communism. It's Stalinism and Maoism with a sort of capitalist modern China sheen on it of a few big corporations controlling everything. It's, I said about 20, 25 years ago, the sad thing is that we were turning into China, not China turning into the U.S. Because when China became capitalistic in the 90s, everybody thought, oh, wow, they're going to open up, they're going to blah, blah, blah. Of course, Tiananmen Square put a quick end to any beliefs of that. And subsequent fucking Deng Xiaoping becoming a dictator for life, things like that. Just recently, he grabbed entire corporations and sectors away from the private sector and from sort of rich oligarchs in China. And basically just the party confiscated them almost willy-nilly. There's rampant corruption. There's complete lack of a lot of freedom of expression, speech. Most of their big companies, they literally just stole and copied from America because companies were idiotic enough to give them to them in the greed to push into the Chinese market. The biggest contributors to climate, just pollution, are the growth of countries like China and India as industrial powers. So when you get into climate change, you have to remember that's where the growth comes from. The West has actually been flat to down in these things. And a lot of the roots of this are Marxism as well. It's also an apocalyptic cult. The world is ending unless you prescribe to everything strict that we demand. And they've been saying this every 5 years since the 1960s, 70s, basically. Go back and look at every prediction that's been wrong about all of them. This is not to say that I'm not for protecting the environment and ecological improvement and things like that. I am. But this climate change, which now they call a climate crisis, is a chicken little head cut off, end of the world apocalyptic cult for secular people. The gay movement is tied into this. This is how you see the twisted thing of in the modern left in the West, they're tied in with the Muslim groups. They're also pushing the trans agenda down people's throats after pushing the gay agenda. This is a demasculization of the West. It's going to have lower birth rates in the West. Meanwhile, the birth rates in poor countries and places and in the Muslim world are not going down. on a relative basis. So the West is going to be depleted, and Japan. Again, when I say the West, I sort of mean sort of free, creative places where entrepreneurship and technology can rise and things like that. All part of the Marxist agenda. Disney, ruining so many franchises. Strict quotas now on the inclusion of and making everything women and diverse hires, ruining many IPs because they're just pushing messages that are basically Marxist in their underlying root. But it's not good Marxism. It's not good communism. It's bad and evil, and it does not end well for the average citizen, the plebe, you and me. Biggest hypocrites ever, always hypocrites among Marxism and communism. It's okay for me, but not everybody else has to live under this except for us, the select few. The president of Harvard being allowed to get away with plagiarism and vicious anti-Semitism going on her campus because she's a black woman of color, and they don't want to look bad, and it's becoming, it's where being grouped into a certain group gives you benefits and you're a good person while others are bad. It's also the infantilization of African Americans as poor, misguided children that need to be handed everything and treated with kid gloves. When immigrant groups come from all over the world who have dark skin and do extremely well in America, look at Indians and Pakistanis and don't bitch about fucking racism all the time. Jewish people, and I am one, I'm not religious, but culturally, we've done extremely well in the world with a very small number of people. And yes, we do complain about anti-Semitism because it has risen its head. Black people can complain about racism. It's wrong. Racism is wrong, but there's cultural issues at work in that particular community that need to be looked at. The groups that succeed value things like education, family structure, hard work, business. Hollywood, Disney removing black actors from posters because China's racist, and quite a bit of Asia is actually racist. Quite a bit of the world is actually racist in terms of valuing light skin over dark skin. This was not a product of colonialization purely as some think. Colonization actually had a lot of good aspects to it, or put it this way, things would be worse without it. And of course, the left getting in bed with anti-Semitism when there's 15 million Jewish people in the world and 2 billion Muslims who are anti-gay, anti-women, and anti-anybody who isn't a Muslim. It's basically convert or die when it really comes down to it. Imagine if the West, Christians and Judeo-Christians and Buddhists and Sikhs and Hindus and things like that believed in 14th century versions of their religion. They don't. They believe in modern versions that are very secular, reform. That's what the Muslims are sort of living by as a code. And to be in bed with them is possibly the most illiberal thing to do. And these people have been indoctrinated as a tool of Marxism. People who say there's a genocide going on in Gaza, there's more Palestinians than there were ever before. A genocide is getting rid of a group of people. There's more Palestinians. Palestinians, by the way, gotten tons and tons of money, as have Israel and Egypt. Egypt gets as much money as Israel every year, approximately, from the U.S. They've gotten tons and tons of money and pilfered it away on corruption and military and terrorism, just like the oil Arab countries have. Reagan had some faults, but he was pretty dead on in retrospect, warning of being a red baiter, being a Soviet Union hater. And I'm old. I remember the 70s. I remember the 80s. 70s, I was just a little child. I went to high school in the 80s. And I was a Democrat. I was raised a liberal. My dad is a college professor who is underlying root Marxist. He's actually a dean now. My mom is a California hippie liberal. So I've developed my own developed my own philosophy and viewpoint of the world, being over 50 years old and experienced things, lived in multiple countries, done multiple fields, some successfully, sometimes extremely down, experience ups and downs. Fascism. Fascism and Marxism are connected. They say the right is fascist, Trump is a fascist, etc. And there are. And but the actual band of politics, it's sort of authoritarianism combined with the kind of crony capitalism or large capitalism that's going on right now, whereby, companies are looking to get monopolies and they have uber power. Again, climate change tied in to Marxism at its underlying core. They want us to go back to this agrarian idyllic world of everybody eating plants and working on farms and everybody buying local and no cars, no transport. That never existed, and when it did exist, it was serfs and landowners and plebes, and people were poor and had shitty lives. And there actually is a lot of stuff coming out that they're pushing us to basically, in the future, they're gonna want us to eat man-made goo and insects and things like that, because actually growing plants is bad for the environment too. It's just because of global overpopulation. As the standard of living has risen in countries like China and India and around the world, people are living longer, so they're consuming more resources and they're growing share. So, and things like growing avocados and things like that. But not eating meat, first off, it goes against the basic nature of man, because since the beginning of time, although there were grains, which grains are being outlawed as well, but man was a hunter gatherer, hunting meat, surviving on meat, protein. I got a few charts of the political spectrum, the band, but I couldn't find the one in particular I was looking for. But left, totalitarianism, Leninism, Maoism, Marxism. Right, totalitarianism, fascism, Nazism. Now, they say anarchy in the middle. I wouldn't necessarily put it there. But the further you go this way, it connects. It connects around the back. When you want to tell everybody what to do, that you know best for them, that the government knows best, that they should pay all their money into taxes to the government experts and the elites, that a certain program should be taught in all education systems, that the current environment you live in is horrible, even though America is the most successful country experiment of all time. Large country. Again, this one puts it down here like this. And I majored in political science in college. I know there's a lot of sort of modern day political scientists who break things in a million ways. But you really want to see the big picture, folks. That's all you really need to see. The communism, here they call it the lunatic fringe, anarchism, Islamism, fascism, nationalism, socialism. Okay? That's Marxism light. This is what's extremely popular right now. I suppose you could say the successful examples of this are Scandinavia. Of course, this is when Scandinavia, and first off, it's a bunch of different countries with a bunch of different politics that change over time. I'm going to just group and generalize, but first off, it was pretty homogenous nationality, and particularly culturally, but also, they implement safety nets and things like that. Of course, what is it? What country one is it? Finland or Norway supports theirs with oil drilling. Other countries, they have a variety of things. But socialism quickly can slip into statism and authoritarianism and communism. Picking favorites, the government taking all of your money. It doesn't necessarily work in large countries with diverse things, with a variety of education levels and cultural things going on. What I think we should be pushing towards is like sort of the Western melting pot concept. And this is an area where Europe in particular has failed. America is now dividing itself by this worse and worse and worse. I think I went to public elementary school with a lot of African American people and rednecks, and I got along better with the African American people. My best friends were in elementary school, and I think race relations are actually worse nowadays because there's more dividing, and there's not an acceptance of sort of willful dividing, but also, with the melting pot and all that type of thing, that we should be encouraging that. Indian and Pakistani people are probably the best type of example you can come up with. Also, Asian people in general. But when you look at second and third generation Indian and Pakistani people who are stock market analysts, who are film directors, who are DJs, who are stoners, who are etc., they're Americans. Black people are Americans. Most black people have been here longer than virtually most of the white people. They are part of the American fabric, and racism should never be tolerated based on the color of someone's skin, whether white or black, or yellow, or tan, or brown, any shade. But there also, you have to look culturally. It used to be sort of 50-50, a balance between, wow, we have to get our shit together, and racism. Now it's swung 80%, 90% to the blame game of racism for everything. Again, here's another sort of example where they talk about tyranny and liberty, communism and fascism. Remember what the Nazi Party was. The National Socialist Party was their name. And they did have many socialist principles within their government. So here are the communism, fascism, socialism, liberal, moderate, conservative, libertarian, where they say total freedom and mob rule. Basically, the gist is a lot of this is, first off, supporting this flag as a concept. Not necessarily the flag itself, but the concept, the ideals, what not necessarily was equally available to everybody, but what is equally available to everybody in a perfect world. I believe this is a true Hitler quote, but Hitler's definition of socialism: socialism, one who gives up the common good without giving up his individuality or personality or the product of his personal efficiency. Our adopted term socialist has nothing to do with Marxian socialism. Marxism is anti-property. True socialism is not. Marxism places no value on the individual or individual effort or efficiency. True socialism, blah, blah, blah. So all great inventions, discoveries, achievements were first the product of an individual brain. It is charged against me that I'm against property, that I'm an atheist. Both charges are false. Well, first off, he is an atheist. He was an atheist. Hitler was a vegan, health nut, a failed artist, and I believe an atheist. And also he wasn't even possibly like a pure-blood Aryan. But these are the extremes of what you don't want to reach, and what you don't want to be supporting through cultural measures, which is how it's coming out through education, entertainment, including social media, and now business. Business comes from BlackRock is one of the big things with their ESG proposals, which started as environmental, and it was like, we're going to rank companies on polluting the environment and being like cigarette makers, things like that, weapons manufactured. But it basically became what might be considered a diversity empowerment or propaganda arm, whereby they contract with companies who get a lot of money and give a score to companies, and then BlackRock encourages or discourages companies from following this, or discourages them in various ways from not following this. And it's a black box. There's no formula. It's, do we like you? Do we think you're a little too right, or a little too unwoke, or a little too un-PC? You can see this with Elon Musk and the backlash against him, and many other ways. China. Don't let America and the West turn into China. Don't let them fall apart because of China, Russia, oil money. Don't let the left be lose their sense of liberalism in terms of being about fairness, being about looking out for the little guy. Don't let that become authoritarian and telling everybody this is the way. These are the evil people, dividing everybody by groups, by gender, by race. The brainwashing is pretty strong right now. It's unbelievably strong. Don't forget who owns TikTok, by the way, is China. The search results for COVID, the silencing of COVID by Google, who owns YouTube, by Facebook, who owns Instagram and Snapchat, I believe, by Twitter before pre-Elon Musk, was unbelievable. It also was going on before then against right-wing people and things like that, the labeling of races, conspiracy theory, fascist, blah, blah, blah. It's a joke at this point. If you talk honestly about things. And there's a lot of people that I guess you could say lean Democrat who are waking up to this. Unfortunately, the Republicans, I'm a registered independent. I voted both parties. Do I lean more scared of the left now than the right? 1,000%. 1,000%. But the one issue that the things that are killing the Republicans, because they should be destroying these elections. When you have inflation and crime, the problem is they fucking are embedded a lot of people in a cult of Trump, kind of like a cult of climate crisis. But the first time was fine because he was such a massive disruptor that the shaking up of the system was worth it. I would have voted for Trump or Bernie Sanders just to shake up the system. So that shows you where I'm at, I guess you could say. The backlash against him, I predicted this. I said we're going to see a backlash against him like nothing we've ever seen. But I really couldn't imagine how harsh and how fast it's been. It's actually ruining things. Reddit. You know how many subreddits were not political before then that were comedy? They had harsh things from every angle. They had communist subreddits. They had strict, all kinds of left and right populist movements came out of Reddit. But because of the rise of Trump, the backlash, and it was organized. It was clearly organized, likely by Soros-related groups to some degree. If you go in and go look up Soros's octopus web of nonprofit organizations and NGOs and things like that he funds around the world and what they're promoting. He's trying to destroy the West. Now, Soros was a trader who was an immigrant to America who made billion. Well, he made a lot. Now it's billions because of more astute investments over the years. And his son is taking over the empire. This is a guy who President Obama visited his apartment personally when he was running for president. That shows you how powerful he is. It wasn't come to Obama. Obama went there to get support and money. The thing about Obama, I voted for Obama as well. Obama was a socialist Marxist, but he was looking 100 years ahead. And let's just take it step by step, slowly. That was fine. That's moderate. Obama now is in the left would be center right. Bill Clinton would be right wing. That's how far they've swung. And that's not to say everything was perfect back then. But, when you look at some of the sexism and racism, things like that, but other things were a lot better, including the sense of humor, the music, the movies, to some degree, video games. I'm talking about any time between the 90s to the last 10 years. So that was a very wide-ranging, rambling thing I'm not going to give you one simple solution, but the general thing is don't support things that are pushing a bad message. Push back against it on social media and in your life. Don't vote for them. Try not to buy from them. But the big thing is don't let them take away your freedom of expression. Don't let them destroy the ideals of Western civilization, of free speech, free expression, the ability to differ, the ability to have reasonable arguments and discussions together, nuance, upward mobility, the concept and some degree of it, small business entrepreneurship, new tech. But you can't let capitalism run unfettered, and monopolization forming. That's actually been one of the problems with tech is, and I use Amazon products all the time, but there's, I try to avoid when I can joining too many of these type things. I don't buy Apple products. That's a hypocritical company like Nike that builds their things in China and sells overpriced consumer products to people, yet acts like they're woke. And those are original woke companies. Apple and Nike been woke since way back. We knew that. It's or fake woke. It's the Disneys of the world who are new emergers to it. All right.